Good morning to everybody. Let's hit the recording. Got it. Clip. So it really is a pleasure and an honor to introduce Yael Averbuch West. And I don't want to embarrass her, but she's got a profile that is just unbelievable. The only thing missing is a cape on her back, to be honest. I'm gonna talk a little bit about her, and this is the short version, because I could go probably for 30 minutes. But Yael was born in New York City, like I was as well, in the Bronx, but she lived most of her life, I believe, in Montclair, New Jersey, where she attended high school there. And throughout her whole schooling, every time I was researching her, she pops up. She's always on the high honor roll at like everywhere she's ever gone to school. 4 years, high honor roll status at high school. So she really epitomizes that whole phrase of a student athlete. NSCAA All-American at high school, USYSA All-American junior, sophomore, junior, senior, attended a University of North Carolina, which was, I believe, was her dream as a young girl to go to that school, which she did, played for the legendary Anson Dorrance, who's a good friend of mine. And I think that's how Yael and I met, actually, from him. Yael set a record for starting at 105 consecutive games at UNC, two-time captain, two-time NCAA titles. I might correct me if I get it wrong. 2 times first-team All-American, 1 time second-team All-American, NCAA Scholar Athlete of the Year, NCAA double record for the fastest goal versus Yale in 4 seconds. Although during my recent research, someone actually broke her record scoring in 3 seconds. Can you imagine that? She blames it on the lofty shot that she did that added that extra second time. She was National Player of the Year, ACC Offensive Player of the Year, NCAA Coaches All-American, ACC Scholar Athlete of the Year, played professionally, and had the distinction of playing for the New Jersey Lady Stallions in the old W League from the age of 14, being the youngest ever player at the time. Played for roughly, I believe, 8 professional clubs, including a very short stint in Russia after the W League, I think, was suspended and a lot of players were looking for places to go. Then she wound up over in Sweden, I think, for about 1.5 years. Internationally, Yael has played every single level, starting with the under 14 women's national team all the way up to the top team. And I just a couple more little extras here. She's written articles for the New York Times. She has her own blog. She's active on social media. She's also got her own Techne Futbol soccer training app that provides personal training programs. It was really, I believe, inspired by her journey of having practiced a lot of hours on her own and becoming as good as she was technically, and her way of giving back to other players. She's currently the general manager of FC Gotham in the women's league, and just an amazing role model, not just for little girls, but for little boys and for coaches and parents. And with no further ado, we give you Yael.
Well, thank you. That was a very kind, generous introduction. I really appreciate it, Tom and Paul. Thank you guys for inviting me on. I'm gonna share my screen, and I've prepared a little presentation. But since the group is fairly small, I would love to make this as conversational as you guys want to make it. So please feel free if you want to throw questions in the chat, and then Tom or Paul can, pull them out for me. Or if anybody wants to jump in and say, hey, wait a second, stop there, let's talk about that more, please do. Like Tom said, really, I'm going to talk about my business, but in the context of like the whole idea behind my business is to try to share the journey that I had with other soccer players. And why I think that my journey is kind of, it can be applied to many players in the US, because I think, unfortunately, unlike players in other countries, I grew up in a family and a household that didn't know soccer, and soccer was not part of our culture. So my presentation, I'll share my screen, it talks about soccer as a lifestyle, and that's something that, unfortunately, you guys can see this, right?
Yes.
Okay, it's something that, unfortunately, is not very typical of the American soccer player. And we think about soccer in the US, and really for many players, it's a pastime, just like they get dropped off at tutoring, taekwondo, soccer, horseback riding. It's one of many things players do. And for reasons that probably have to do with my personality and my family upbringing, and also just that I was fortunate to have really amazing coaches and mentors, soccer became for me so much more than something I participated in and participate in still today. It is totally interwoven into the fabric of my life. It's something I love beyond what I can explain in this presentation. So what I've done in this presentation is I've actually used my business and the platform that I've created to talk through some stories and some really influential mentors that I had as a youth player. And when I think back now, I have such an appreciation for the people who I interacted with in my soccer journey. And so my hope is in sharing these stories with you is to just have you today think about the ways in which you're impacting the players you work with and the things that you're already doing and can maybe add and do a little bit more that may help more players to really view soccer as such an important piece of their life and not just something they participate in, they have maybe some goals in, and then once they're done with their playing career, they're done. Like, I think that, you know, as coaches, and for me, the way I view myself now as a mentor is if I can help a player to create a long-lasting love of the game so that one day they are an owner of a club, a supporter with season tickets to a club, they're a coach themselves, they go on to play professional soccer, whatever it is where they can continue their journey, they view themselves as a soccer person for life. So I'm going to just go to the next slide. So really, like I talked about a little bit, my journey, oh, sorry, what did you say?
This is Randy.
Oh, hi.
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I appreciate everyone who's joined. I see Tom and Paul, should I be admitting people or are you guys still able to do that?
I'll admit them, Yael.
Okay, great. Just checking. Great. So like I said, my journey is one of really falling in love with this game from having known nothing. I started playing when I was 7 years old because my friend in school played soccer and I thought it looked like fun. My parents are both lifelong athletes, but neither of them knew anything about soccer. So when I look at the platform that I created with Techne Futbol, the app, it's based on my journey as a player, literally from the point in which I was learning, you know, the point in which I was learning what the sport was all about. So growing up, when I first started playing, because my parents were athletes, they knew that whatever it is you do, your discipline, your sport, you kind of chip away at it every day. So when I started playing soccer, immediately we as a family had all these questions. Well, as a soccer player, what are the skills you need to learn? What should you be doing on your own? Can I prepare for my team practice session before I go there? What should I be watching or learn? Who should I be learning from? And all these things that now I realize maybe is not a normal approach to any pastime that your kid participates in. But really, this approach to the sport and the mentors I had really helped me to develop this joy in training and getting better, a feeling of this personal ownership over my journey as a player. Well, did I want to keep playing on my rec team, or did I feel ready to try out for the travel team? Should I play on a boys team maybe to get more of a challenge? And all these decisions that maybe weren't normal for a player to start thinking about. I didn't just follow the path that everyone else did. I kind of took that ownership to realize that I could do something a little bit different. Additionally, over the years, as I got a little bit older, that kind of morphed into the discipline, the consistency in training, the self-awareness to provide feedback based on performances and know what I needed to work on. So all of this and all of these aspects that are really not soccer specific, they have to do with a lifestyle and a character that I developed through the sport. They are really, really integral to the platform I created for other players. So like I said, looking at my journey, the way I've broken this presentation down is I've picked out a handful of coaches who had this enormous impact on me as a young person and up until through my professional career. So the way I talk about this, I'm going to talk about this, is through stories that I've actually labeled with these coaches' names. And the first coach I call out is Ashley Hammond, a local coach in Montclair, New Jersey. And he was kind of my first serious coach when I decided I wanted to do a little bit more than recreational soccer. I wanted to try out for the travel team. Ashley was the first person, I think, who noticed that myself and my family, we were pretty serious about what I was doing. Although I was still a beginning player, believe me, I was not anything special. I didn't have any special knowledge, but I would show up early. I was always asking, what things should I know or what should I be doing? And Ashley was the first one to say, I think at that point too, as maybe an 8 or 9-year-old, I said I wanted to be a professional soccer player. I had no idea what that meant. But the boys in my class said, they wanted to be baseball players or basketball players. So I said, oh, I like soccer. That's what I do. I'll be a soccer player. And I think at one point I told that to Ashley and he said, well, do you know how to juggle the ball? Do you know how to control the ball with your chest? And he had all these skills. He said, can you do all these things? And I said, no, honestly, I didn't even know if I had heard of juggling. I said, no, I can't, but show me, like, what should I be doing? And in doing that, it seems kind of silly that Ashley asked those questions immediately, but now that I think back, it was probably the most important turning point in my life as an athlete was that Ashley put the onus on me. If I said I had this goal, I wanted to be a professional player, but any player, if they want to make the competitive team, if they want to play varsity in high school, whatever it is they want to do, well, what are you doing as a player to be able to do that? It's not on your coach. It's not on your parent to figure it out for you. And Ashley asked these questions of me, and it immediately got me thinking, now that I look back, is what should I be doing? What should I be practicing? What should I be learning? And how should I embark on this process if I actually want to do what I said I want to do? So on the Techne platform, this is really embodied in the ability that players have to track what they're doing, to build that awareness and to put the responsibility on them. So in the app, as they train, they time themselves while they work, and they can keep track on their profile of how much time they've worked, to understand that, this is a body of work. It takes time to develop skills. It takes patience. It's not something you do in a day or a single week or a month or even a year. It's a lifelong endeavor. And as they work, they can track their things like a training streak. So how consistently you're training. They go through our training sock system, which is kind of based on the general mindset, although it's been debated, the exact number, 10,000 hours. It's based on that mindset that it takes a lot of hours of work to become good at something if you want to do that. And so to get players thinking about, they go through their training sock system, kind of like the belt system in martial arts. And a lot of this shares a lot of commonality with martial arts. It's the understanding that you're embarking on a process as a player if you want to learn to develop a relationship with the ball and this game. And really, like I said, Ashley was the one who he asked the right questions. And I think sometimes when I still view myself as a player first and foremost, I think about the things that were most impactful on me. And quite often they were the questions that coaches asked me, or the challenges they posed where I had to go figure it out. It wasn't the coaches who told me things or gave me the answers or showed me the final product. It was them putting it on me to go do or go think about on my own. So that's the impact that Ashley had on my career, which, like I said, was probably the initial catalyst for me really embarking on this journey in the first place. So the next coach I had, and he actually was hired by Ashley. So Ashley was really impactful in a lot of ways, but a guy named Ricky was an English guy who would pick me up after school and take me to go practice juggling. And I remember him showing me things. He was kind of like, he could do a lot of tricks with the ball. More of what we know now is freestyle, and definitely things that go far beyond what a young soccer player needs to know how to do in terms of the basics of ball control. But what Ricky showed me, and he explained to me once, I remember he was head juggling, and I was watching him thinking like, no way can I ever keep the ball up head juggling. And he said to me something, in other words, basically about, it's crazy because you'll practice, and one day it'll just click and you'll just keep going and you can do maybe 50. And I was thinking 50, no way will I ever be able to do that. But Ricky gave me ways to track my progress and ways to keep score. And that's why I think juggling is such an impactful thing for players to practice. And in the Techne app, we have what we call our time trial drills, which are all things where players can actually track numbers. It's how many reps can you do in a minute? And they can get a little medal if they get a certain number. And they basically, though, can track their little graph of progress over time as they improve on these skills. And this is all based on what Ricky showed me. And Ricky really, I think back on what Ricky taught me and really thinking about it and the intersection of my slightly obsessive personality, and maybe the word slightly in there could be arguable, but I'm a sucker for these kind of things. Like I'm really into keeping track of things, feeling that progress. And I think actually a lot of players' personalities are like that. You know, players are competitive. They want to feel that first moment of progress. And juggling was the first way I could connect with that feeling of making progress as a player. A lot of other ways you can make progress, like just your comfort on the ball, your understanding of the game, they're a little bit harder to actually track and to be aware of. And as a young player, to be able to count my scores on things, and I had a piece of paper and I would write down my score, I'd cross it out, I'd write down my new record. That was life-changing for me. That allowed me to actually chart out and to set a goal and to systematically work on it every single day to try to achieve that goal. So this is what the gift that Ricky gave me in showing me all the different surfaces I could use to juggle. Like I said, head juggling and all these things that they aren't necessarily even things I use directly on the field, but they allowed me to embark in that process and to feel the improvement. And a little bit later on my journey, I had a coach named Ian. And with Ian, he was all about, we would do these footwork patterns with the ball. So dribbling footwork patterns, and he'd have me memorize these fairly complex footwork patterns. And in thinking back now, I think about what he was doing, and it wasn't about memorizing the pattern. It wasn't about that I was going to need to do a scissor, step over, lunge, all these moves in a row in a game. It was that it was impossible for me to succeed in Ian's training sessions unless I practiced at home. And so immediately after training with these footwork patterns, I would have to go into the car and I'd have to write down what it was to make sure I could practice. And if I wanted to be any further along next time I saw Ian, I would have to practice and memorize these patterns. And so a lot of what I think is so important for young players to feel is that, why is it important to do these things at home? Because you can, as a coach, say, you know, you should be training on your own, but actually, why should they be doing it? And how do you go about doing that? Ian allowed me an easy connection to understand why I should do that. And from there, I started to develop an understanding. Well, if I wanted to work on my footwork pattern, but it was raining outside, well, I had to maybe clear out a space in my living room. Or if, in New Jersey, unfortunately, I hope most of you are in places with weather better than ours in New Jersey, but in New Jersey, when there's snow on the ground, I had to shovel a space, in my driveway, on the street, or if it was nighttime, find an area in a parking deck with a light so that I could practice. And I think a lot of what's important for players is not even so much what they practice, it's the creative ways that they start to think about getting their training in with the ball anywhere, anytime. And so what Techne hopefully offers these players, and what I talk about all the time and I write about and I speak about when I talk to young players, is that creative thinking and understanding the importance of making this your own. You're not always going to have a field and even cones, like use a water bottle, throw down a sock, get creative with what you're doing. And honestly, the things I remember most over the years, no joke, is not when I was playing on a nice green grass field with a goal and a net. It's when my family was on vacation and we would drive around to find some little tennis court so I could, practice my juggling, or to look for a wall to practice passing, because I didn't, like I said, my parents didn't play. I had a younger sister, but, until she got good enough to pass back and forth with me, I needed a training partner and I didn't have one. So as a coach, the more you can help players by giving them assignments where they need to go practice on their own, you'll help them to develop that mindset and those skills to just think about planning it in. If you have training on Monday night and you're going to see the players again on Thursday, well, leave them with something a little bit difficult where they should practice it and maybe show you their progress by Thursday. And something like that is really easy for players to conceptualize. Okay, I need to practice this one thing to show my coach on Thursday. And really by default, what they'll be doing is they'll be going home and they need to then think about, well, when am I going to practice it before Thursday? I need to find time on Tuesday and Wednesday and maybe Thursday right before training. And then also, where am I going to practice it? If I come home from school and the weather's bad or it's late, I need to figure that all out. And that is a huge learning experience in life in general, not just on the soccer field. So the next influential coach I've picked out is a guy named Kazbek Tambi, and he was an Olympic level player for the US. He played on the Cosmos back in the day. I don't know if many of you guys remember that league, but he got to play with, Beckenbauer and some of the best players in the world. And Kaz was my coach through high school, and really, Kaz changed my life in the sense that he showed me that this sport is so much bigger than just my experience in it. Because Kaz loves the game and still does more than anyone I've ever met, probably. And he would play with us. He would call me up and say, hey, I'm at a training session at a field. Do you want to come hit long balls? He knew that I had this desire to do more. He would invite me to train with guys from literally all over the world who would jump in with our club girls team. I mean, I'm talking about in Kaz's environment, I played with men from Peru, Portugal, Turkey. I could probably name 10 countries in any given week that I play with players from. And through the environment he created, Kaz taught me to love the game. I didn't really understand what it meant to love the game. I knew I had fun playing. I had these goals. I was really serious by the time I got to high school. But something that some players need to be taught, because especially in the US, we don't have the same culture here that we do in other countries where football is everything. I had to be taught to love the game. I had to be taught to watch the game and to appreciate it. Kaz would come to training and said, oh, who saw Real Madrid play the other week? And I said, Real Madrid, what is that? I hadn't heard of these teams. I didn't understand that there was this bigger world out there to connect with and a bigger culture. And what Kaz gifted me with through this experience is the feeling that I could go anywhere in the world and connect with people over this game. And, I'd travel and I'd be in Belgium and I say kids kicking the ball around. And if the ball came over to me, I could flick it up, juggle a few times and hit it back. And they would immediately say, oh, we have something in common. I could go out to a field and play pickup and enjoy it and not speak the same language as anyone there, but also still speak the same language in quotes and really bond with people. And what I hope my training platform is able to do for players is to give them a little bit of that bigger picture, a little bit of the lifestyle that people who love this sport deeply can appreciate. And it has to do with watching the game. It has to do with truly loving the game, with feeling the game and the rhythm of the game. It's so much more than just going out and practicing for yourself. It's about connecting with people and connecting with a much broader culture. And I think that quite often, like I said, there needs to be the impetus for players to find this, and they don't find it on their own in the US, unfortunately, still for the most part. We're probably just getting to the point where players might have parents who played, but still many don't. And so to encourage your team to go watch a game live together as a pastime, as a team bonding experience, or to ask them about who watched a professional game over the weekend, or who are your favorite players in the world, those kind of things, to encourage them to have answers to those questions, can change a player's entire experience with the sport. So now fast forward a little bit to college, and at University of North Carolina, playing under Anson Dorrance. For any of you who know about the program there, his system is all about something called the competitive cauldron. And every single thing we did in training was logged and tracked. So my speed in relation to my teammates, my ability to head the ball and win a 1v1 heading duel, how I did on every single 1v1 I did the entire time I was in college, every shot I took, whether it was on target, off target, hit the post, went in, the goalkeeper saved it, every single thing we did, every small-sided game I played in, did I win, lose, draw, regardless of if it was 3v3, 5v5, 9v9. Every time I stepped on the field and touched the ball, it was my success or not was being recorded. And as you can imagine, especially for somebody like myself, who by this point cared so deeply about what I was doing and had such a now long-standing connection with this, that was an extremely stressful environment, and stressful in a good way for the most part, but yes, stressful, I would say. And really the whole idea behind this competitive cauldron was a couple things. One is the ownership over what you're doing, because when you're with other people on the field, it's easy to say, well, our team lost, it was all of us. Well, yes, it was all of you, but it was also each one of you who contributed. And same thing with winning. Every single person plays a part. And so that was highlighted so much in the program at UNC. And what I took from this is the value of competition. And competition meaning there are a lot of levels to competition that I recognize now. And I think it's important for players to recognize. And it's not just competition against the opponent. Competition against the opponent is something that I realized at my time at UNC, that's the last piece of the puzzle, honestly. And that's the part that if you do everything right during the week, and if you've done everything right all alone, that part you almost have to worry about the least. It's the competition against your teammates every single day. And the fact that competing all out against your teammates is how you show them respect. And I think often, especially maybe on the girls' side, people feel uncomfortable with competing in training and really, sliding to try to win a ball or save a ball or caring too much, all those things. And that's how you show your teammates respect. And that's where it becomes really fun to play with a group of people, when you're all trying as hard as you can against each other, so that on game day, your opponent feels like nothing. And then to take it even a level further, it's competing against yourself. And especially for the most elite players in their team environments, players should be encouraged to compete against themselves. It may not be enough to just dominate in your club team environment, or even dominate against another team your age. It's about bettering yourself every single day. And that is what I certainly learned and was reinforced at UNC. As I would look at the list and I would say, okay, well, I'm never going to be the fastest one here. I'm a very average pace player, and at UNC we had some of the best athletes in the country. So for me, if I could go from ranking 14 to ranking 10, that was success. So to start to look at things and understand competition in a really nuanced way is I can compete with the people around me, but I'm really competing to make myself better. And I'm also competing to make them better. And competition is the best and most natural way for players to improve at anything. So in the Techne app, we have our leaderboard system where players can compete in terms of an awareness of how much they're training, how consistently they're training, what their scores are on our time trial drills, to not only track their own improvement, but also do that in relation to other players in their club, on their team, or even worldwide using the app. And then the last coach I want to highlight, fast forwarding to my professional career, you guys may know this guy now. He's currently the coach of the US women's national team, but Vlatko Andonovski had a profound impact on me as a player. And this impact came actually really late in my career, in probably my 7th, 8th, 9th year as a professional player. So just kind of giving that frame of reference and the mindset I had about always striving to be better. Even as a 10th year pro, I was not satisfied one day of my career. And I probably, to be honest, would have enjoyed it a little bit more if I could have been more satisfied with how I was doing. But what Vlatko helped me to do and to understand was the process to transfer all of the skills I had practiced on my own over the years into the game. And I really believe that if I had had Vlatko as a coach earlier on in my career, I would have had a longer and more impactful career on the national team, which at the end of the day was my goal as a player. It's something I, in my personal goal setting, fell a little bit short of. It was my dream to represent our country in a World Cup and Olympics. I had really high aspirations, and I was never able to truly break in on the national team level. I was always kind of a bubble player for many years. And I believe that if I had been coached by Vlatko for longer, he could have helped me to better transfer all of those hours I spent, striking the ball well with both feet and putting spin on the ball and practicing different first touches, no matter how the ball came to me, and to actually make myself more effective in the game based on those things. And this is a really difficult thing, I think, as a coach or as a player to improve, to work on that final stage of transferring the skills that players can learn in isolation or even learn in a team environment and training, and then bring them into the top pressure moments in a game. So in the Techne app, we do delve in a little bit to mental training and the mental side of the game. And I think there are a couple things that help players with this. And one of them is the understanding and the work to appreciate the mental piece of this. And we actually in the app have audio recordings from professional players about their expertise. So you can see on this page, we have Roger Espinoza, Sporting Kansas City legend, talking about consistency. I mean, he's played, I don't even know how many years now he's been on the team, but he has been a major player at the professional level, doing well year in and year out consistently. So we have him talking about that. I'm actually working upcoming with Lynn Williams to talk about goal scoring. And we have Matt Turner, US men's national team goalkeeper, talking about staying ready for your big moment. So all of these things, all of these intangibles that players go throughout their journey and their career that allow the top players to be as successful as they are, to help to try to raise awareness earlier on in players' lives and development. And something I think back on in my own development as a player is my lack of understanding and appreciation for the mental skills needed, not just meeting a sports psychologist when things were tough or things were going wrong, but actually, like I was training my technical skills and physical skills, to train my mental skills, to allow myself on game day to relax, even though I knew I had put in all this work to prepare and I cared so much about my performance and my team's performance. Well, that actually sometimes hurt me because I needed to do some breathing exercises probably and to relax and lower my heart rate and lower my adrenaline rush or whatever was going on. And Vlatko is probably the best coach I have seen at explaining moments in the game and how to apply various techniques or various skills that you may learn and practice in isolation, and understanding as a player how to think about them, when to think about them, and how to also watch game tape of yourself and analyze and not just beat yourself up over it, but to actually take something and learn from it and be able to do it better next time. It's such a difficult thing as a player, even at the top level. And Vlatko, I think, is an expert at that. So unfortunately, a little bit late in my career, as I mentioned, but a total game changer for me personally in terms of working on transferring these things. And this is where I think it gets really difficult, and only the best of the best coaches are actually really equipped to help players with the full understanding of how all the pieces come together. So just last, before we open it up to questions, if you'd like to learn more about the platform, I have the website here. Also, if you want to get in touch with me after, if you don't get to ask a question or we don't get to discuss something you're interested in, I have my email. You can try out the app for a free trial. But really, I think hopefully the message that I want to leave you with today is to just think about all the many ways and everything you say and everything that you do that you're impacting these players, not just as soccer players, but their lives. And I was like a sponge. Everything. I remember a coach one time holding the ball on his foot and doing a little around the world trick, and that I went home and I practiced that for days, to the point where I strained my hip flexor, actually. I remember something that Kaz said to us as a joke one time in practice when players on the team wanted a day off. And he said, why do you want a day off? If you love something, you should want to do it all the time. Like, if you love ice cream, do you want a day off from eating ice cream? And it was such a silly, goofy story, but I think about that all the time. And so the things you say, the stories you tell your players, the things you show them, your participation, your body language in the session, it all, you never know what's getting absorbed. And I think about that because I was literally absorbing it all. And there were things that I bet coaches don't even remember that they did or said that literally changed my life and changed everything I do and how I approach the game and how I love the game. So now when I think of the journey that I can share back with players and the value that you guys have as coaches day in and day out on the field with those players, it really, it's an enormous platform to influence people. So I am going to stop sharing my screen. And now I would love to delve in anywhere that anyone's interested. So please don't be shy, jump in with questions, comments, thoughts.
Well, wow, yeah, that was fantastic. I mean, you know, the way that you speak about this and the story, how clearly you shared all those beautiful stories, it totally resonates with me because I was nowhere near like you, you know, as I'm guessing the amount that you went into it, but I do remember, you know, falling in love with certain moments. And what resonated with me was your juggling story. I remember being out on the front yard and just juggling and going, wow, man, I got 8, I got 10. And I remember just having those little breakthroughs where it's like I went from like 10, 12, and then all of a sudden I was almost at 100. And that's when I started to really, really fall in love with the idea of getting better, right? And that you're in charge of your own development. And it was just amazing. And I don't really have, like anything clear with like deliberate training, as far as like your grasp of deliberate training, right? I think at an early age is amazing, right? And I think this is what the app is doing, right? It's just helping kids realize how they can fall in love and improve every day. It's amazing.
Yeah, if I can just jump in real quick. I had high expectations for this presentation, but you smashed it out of the park. It was great. I can't help thinking, Paul, we talk about this all the time, right? With the work that we do with young kids, pre-teen, and Yael has been a huge early supporter of both myself and the work we do with the Soccer Starts at Home. But I can't stop thinking about when the ball mastery for little kids and how that teaches a child how to pay attention. And when you learn how to pay attention very early, that turns the learning switch on. And it sounds like somewhere along your career as a young girl, you somehow had that ability, or you learned it somehow early on how to pay attention. And it's throughout your entire career. When I was doing your introduction, you've excelled like ridiculously in the classroom as well, academically, both out on the soccer field as well. And I'm just wondering, maybe you could talk a little bit about, okay, well, how did you get that focus at such an early age? Because it is very rare to find, and it seems like it's nurtured maybe by a mother or father or a good coach you had early on. But maybe if you could address that.
It's a good question. And I think about this a lot because I certainly did not have a normal mindset for a young kid. When I think about what was going through my head and even things I wrote in my journal as a young player, I was very self-aware. I was very serious, and I was thinking about things a lot in a way that I think some of it is just me. And just like any skill, I think that attention and focus comes a lot more naturally to certain people, just like does the discipline, just like some players might be quicker or more coordinated athletes. And some players, like the technical pieces of the game, I think because of my focus and attention to detail, did come a little bit easier to me. So it was fun for me to practice them because I felt good at them. And I think that really what it to me is all about, and I've tried to break this down and think about what happened, why was I like that, and what perpetuated it. I think the first time a player can feel themselves improve, it changes everything. Yeah, and important. So that happened for me pretty early on. I felt a positive feedback loop, and it might not even have been in soccer. It might have been because my parents are just really positive and tell me I'm good at everything. And they spend a lot of time with me, and we were physical and outside. And so they probably told me I was a good athlete, and maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. Because when I see me throw a ball now, like, I'm definitely not. So I don't know. But what I think is so valuable, and what I've noticed with our training platform, is that if a player can stick with it enough to feel that first success of improvement, and maybe it's dribbling in and out of cones without your ball hitting the cone, maybe it's getting 10 juggles, like it's a huge landmark for a player, whatever it is, then they realize, oh, I can do this and I can repeat this feedback loop. And for me, that positive feedback loop was triggered like thousands of times. Like if I think about, because I had the focus to stick with it, I kept doing it and I kept succeeding. And so then I wanted to focus more. And so I got looped in really early and pretty easily. But I think for everybody else, even if it takes a little bit more time, it's how do you get to that first point of success? And how can you, as a coach or a parent or a mentor, lower the bar enough so that a player can do it? So maybe it's just holding the ball, kicking it back up once and catching it again. And that's how you start juggling, and allowing the player to feel, can you do 20 of those in a row, alternating feet? And I've actually worked with players who could not hold the ball, drop it, kick it back up and catch it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do I break this down even further? How can I have them get a little bit of success? So I think it's about, and now as a parent, I think of this too. It's funny because you see like little kids walking around, even learning to walk. How can you start that feedback loop? And you might have to backtrack a lot with certain players, and some players might be way further along and you can show them really fun, exciting things to do. But I think that's the key. It's that first hook that you get as a person or player. And like I said, I think for some people, it just comes more naturally and their personality wants to latch on to something like that, like mine, and others it's harder.
But I think what the takeaway about this is for coaches working with young kids is giving these easily attainable goals very quickly that they can accomplish, because that's that whole self-empowerment, self-belief, self-esteem that wants them to experiment more with the ball once they can do one or two things, and that's that click. So what is that one or two things? So yeah, that's great feedback. Let's see if someone wants to unmute themselves or raise their hand, please.
Yael, this is Sam. With your work with Vlatko, what were some of the methods that he used? What were some of the ingredients in terms of, from what I was hearing, you taking a very technique approach and how to apply it in game situations, and particularly at a professional level, and as Walt Chiswitz used to say, being able to play inside of a phone booth.
Yeah, Vlatko. So it's been such a learning curve for me, having stepped away from playing to now recognize what was so impactful. And so I've thought about this a lot. And I think that what Vlatko is really unique at, which shouldn't be so unique, but it is, unfortunately, my whole time as a pro player, I never had this, is to help players identify moments. So there would be, what would happen to me in a game quite often is I had all these skills at my disposal, and then I would miss the one important moment. Like the one time I needed to take a perfect first touch, I would be so worked up or have run so hard or something that I didn't know that now is the time to relax and focus, and here's how I should be thinking of it. And so what Vlatko did was he quite often it was actually in a defensive way. So I became a defender of Vlatko. I was an attacking player my whole life. And when he actually told me I was going to play center back, I laughed at him because like I was that bad at defending. But what he did was he viewed defending, and he views defending as a technical skill. So he would have us identify moments, and he'd say to us, and this is so important for players, he'd say to us, this will happen one time this season. And if you don't do it right, the other team will probably score. And if you do it right, no one will notice. And the acknowledgement of that, to me, it changed everything, the way I think about it. Because what I was doing now as a player was I was understanding, why was I practicing this certain type of run back and certain type of clearance? Well, I'm practicing it for the one time in the season I don't want us to get scored on. And in my head, when it would happen in the game, and it would happen one time in the season, like Vlatko said, I recognized the moment and I'd say, oh, this is my one time. And I'd be so then pumped up about doing it right in the one time and so hyper focused that I could execute the skill. And similarly, he would show us, he would say, okay, we're going to practice this way of moving the ball around the back line. And what's going to happen is you're going to be doing it. And 3 times in the game, Marta is going to decide she's going to try to pickpocket you right here. So be on the lookout, look out of the corner of your eye. She's not going to be there. She's not going to be there. And 3 times ish in the game, she's going to come at you. So what I would do is then I would be ready for that moment to then use the way he showed me, okay, when she's sprinting, you can just bend the ball around her this way. And so technically I could do all these things. I could clear the ball 20 out of 20, how he showed me. I could bend the ball like this, 10 out of 10. I had worked on all these skills, but what would happen to me in the game prior to thinking of it like this is I wouldn't properly recognize the moment, and I wouldn't be hyper aware of when I needed to really focus on that moment. So I would kind of just be, it's impossible for 90 minutes to focus on every moment with equal attention and effort and like conscious thought. So Zlatko helped us to pinpoint those moments. And that's why I wish I had so much more time with him as a coach, because if I could have gotten more of those moments and understood that better, I think I would have just been a different player.
So cool.
Yeah, and if you ask me to do it as a coach now, I definitely couldn't. So easier said than done. But that's where I think he is so smart, and he's a mathematician. So he has calculated how often things occur, how important they are, and even if it's literally a calculation or just a general sense and understanding of the game type calculation, that's how he views it all. And it makes it's really user friendly as a player to know, like, you're going to do this 10 times, Erica Timrak, you're going to dribble 12 times in the game, and 11 times you're going to lose the ball and your teammates are going to be annoyed because they have to track back. And 1 time you're going to break pressure and create a goal scoring opportunity. And that's what he would say to us. And then literally as a player, I'm like, oh, this whole time I'm pissed off at Erica because she's allowed to lose the ball and I'm not, because I'm a holding midfielder. Why is she allowed to? Why is she allowed to? And all he had to say was that one thing. And I was like, oh, I'll chase back 10 times, no problem, for that 11th time when she helps us score. And so it's things like that. There's common sense, but nobody really says as a coach. Nobody acknowledges it. And he just would say it so succinctly that it made it easier.
Oh, here's a good question from my good friend, Robin Russell. Question for Yael. What changes have you noted in the use of your app during the pandemic? More users, engaged longer, more geographical areas? And Robin, who I think you might know yourself as well.
So I gotta do a quick story about how I know Robin real quick before I answer this question. As a young player, like I said, my parents knew nothing about soccer. So like anyone at the time in the 90s, my dad looked up in the Eurosport catalog some soccer VHS tapes that we could order. And one of those VHS tapes, and I still have these all, I don't know, I have a VHS player, so I don't know how to play them, but was Soccer Star. And I remember I had a notebook and I would stop, I'd rewind, I'd write down, okay, stop, turn, and then like a little description of how to do it. Then I'd go step over and I'd stand up and make sure I figured it out. And then I'd go out to the field with my list of all my turns to practice and all my basic skills to figure out how to do this sport, this crazy sport you have to do with your feet. So I connected with Robin, and Robin, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, your exact role in producing this, but basically Robin made this Soccer Star. And so I randomly connected with him for an interview at one point, and I was so excited and now I have the book too that he sent me. So thank you, Robin. But Robin was a huge part of me figuring out what the heck the sport was about. But to speak to, the use of the app during the pandemic, it's really interesting because so the platform I created was thought of and started prior to the pandemic. The intention of the app is not to be soccer players programming. Soccer is a team sport. It's a social endeavor. It's meant to be played against other players in groups. I think the most valuable thing a player can do is to play pickup, get a small game going. So you're playing the game. But obviously during the pandemic, when people could not be together, both mentally and physically, it really exploded. It's a way for players to stay tied in with their teammates through the social element of the leaderboards, and also to continue to progress in their sport when they couldn't be around other people. but actually a big piece of what we're trying to do now is to educate everybody on that is not the proper use case for a platform like this. It's not meant to be virtual learning program where that's the way you experience the sport. It's meant to be the supplement. So if you can, as a coach, motivate your players to understand that it's exciting and they should be spending time in between your practice sessions to do this at home on their own. Well, here are the ideas. Here's the gamification. Here's the fun way to do it if you don't have these other ideas. It's basically encompassing what the coaches I had growing up showed me. And they didn't show me that you should play soccer on your own only. They showed me, if you want to have more fun when you play, you got to be better with the ball at your feet. If you want to be able to look up and pass the ball to your teammate 40 yards, well, you need to be able to hit the ball accurately with your laces over 40 yards. And so what we're doing now really is we have this huge pool of people now who know about us and who are on the platform, and we're trying to educate people on how this plays a part in their development as a player and development as a person. So really, people are using the app from all over the world. And I think the big education still needs to happen in the US, because everywhere else, people understand a little bit more about the sport and the back and forth of how you can play freely and how you can spend that time with the ball casually and more seriously, and how it translates. And in the US still, I think that there's some room to improve in terms of how it's viewed and how it all fits together.
Great. And another
Another
question or so, one by Everick. Where does content come from? Who is able to upload the different type of drills?
So one thing that makes our platform a little bit unique is that we provide all the content. So actually myself, and there's two other pro players, one other former female pro and then a current male pro playing in USL. There are 5 of us who run the company, and 3 of us have professional playing experience, and we provide all of the training content. So I have we launched in 2016, and the year prior to that, I spent probably more hours than I probably even want to count, recording myself and other people I know, doing basically every single thing I could think of over the years that all those wonderful coaches for my presentation had showed me, taught me, skill progressions. So right foot, inside of the foot against the wall, 1 touch, 2 touch, left foot, same thing, alternating, laces, backing, moving closer and further, literally like everything that this drill library that's in my head is now an existing drill library of over 2,000 drills. And the drills are formatted into just small demonstrations. So if imagine you're at the field with a player and you want them to work on something, you'd show them for what, 10, maybe 30 seconds. It's all very short. They can watch it for 1 second and pause if they know what to do, and then they go and they do it. So it's all broken up into really small demos, like I've done with players when I work with them individually. So yeah, we provide all the content, and it's all based on literally kind of our selling point is that these are the things we actually did. These pros, these 3 of us, this is what we actually did as youth players, and what we still do now in our off season, if we had a bad game, what we do when we put on our iPod and or iPod, I guess that's dating me, but you know what I mean, when you're listening to music and you go off to the wall, this is the actual stuff that the players do.
Cool. And then one statement here by Sam. The players in the ODP program from Southern Texas, the state association, use the Techne Futbol app as well. So that's cool. That's a nice.
Yeah, we found ODP. ODP is a really great use case because these are players who already want to do that extra. So a lot of times it's about there are players who want to do extra on all of the teams usually, and some of them know what to do and are doing it already, and some of them don't do it because they don't actually know what to do.
Cool.
Yeah, I have a question for you. So
Sure.
As you became a professional player and you're going deeper into your professional career, how much of this individual kind of technical work did you do on your own as you were playing?
So I think it changed form a little bit. This ended up being what I would stay after on the field 10 minutes to do, or a lot of it in the off season. Unfortunately, we had a long off season for a lot of my career with, the season for women wasn't the full, 10, 11 months with other competitions. So I would have a long off season where I would do a lot of this. And really what I realize now is that for me, a lot of it it was like my meditation. It's how I would come back to remembering my joy and my love of the game. It's how I feel comfortable. Even now, if I go out with the ball, my husband will want to kick around and just do casual stuff. And I want to do what makes me feel good is I want to get in the repetition of doing it properly. And I have this certain way of doing things that for me, I would come back to all the time throughout my professional career because it would really ground me. And that's something that I hope a lot of players can develop is their relationship with the ball, because that never leaves you. You know, hopefully you play for many coaches. Every top player plays on teams where they don't get as much time as they want. They have disappointing performances, all of that. And if you have that relationship with the ball, you can always go back and kind of start fresh and make yourself feel better. And that's what I would do. Literally, my example of I would have a bad game and I just need to go out with my ball under the lights and kick against the wall a little bit and feel good again. And unfortunately, I maybe had too many of those disappointing moments, but that's really how it ended up taking form for me as a professional player. I was always refining and coming back to it in the off season when I had the time and energy to fine tune different things. And it got more specific over the years too, like working on free kicks or a certain type of turn or moment that I realized I was experiencing in the game.
I remember when I was getting ready for that first MLS combine, like way back in 1996, and none of us in America were really in leagues, and we had a bunch of months off. And I found so much joy in a racquetball court, because that's like the perfect and training environment. Like you got the four walls and you know, you could just stay in there for hours and just figure out I really loved what you're talking about, being creative, you know, designing stuff on your own and the joy of that, you know, and I remember, you know, being 22, 23 and just realizing, wow, I'm nowhere near as technical as I could be or as I want to be.
Yeah, and I think what younger players don't realize too is even the top pros, the best players in the world, still work on this stuff and actually becomes more fun. I think of passing the ball over the years, just simple 10-yard one-touch passes. It's more fun for me to do that now than it is when I started, because I can put a little spin on it. I can, you know, you notice every little bounce. You just feel the ball in a different way. And you know, people will say that like, why do we have to pay for an app to practice skills? You definitely do not need to pay for it. Nobody needs to pay for an app to practice skills. That's the bottom line. Everybody should be able to go out and do exactly what you said and find their racquetball court and just find that joy and be creative and figure it out. This is for the people who need help finding that, basically. So I'll be the first one to say, nobody needs to pay for anything or needs any type of technology to learn the sport of soccer. But if you need it, it's here.
Well, I think it's a great tool to keep track of what you're doing. I mean, again, it started out like you were saying in the beginning, that whole idea of, knowing what does development look like, right? And I think there's an appreciation too when young players can adopt that kind of discipline where they are paying more attention to what they're doing. Again, that early being able to be successful, that really ignites that fire from within, that really makes things intrinsic, right? Kids want to do more things because they're successful at it. It's funny because you mentioned the thing about with, as you know, Anson is probably about one of the most competitive human beings on the planet. Everything he does, he tells stories about even like when he was in college himself. I mean, he would do anything, tiddlywinks, anything, you name it. I don't know if you know the story, but that whole idea of measuring everything that you do in training. He told me the story that he actually picked that up when he used to go and sneak into the gymnasium and watch Dean Smith at basketball. And apparently Dean was a stickler where he would measure everything that they did at the training. And he started to pick that up and he was taking notes. And then he kind of adopted that for soccer as well. But yeah, there's nothing better than building that competitive spirit amongst your players.
Yeah, I gotta ask you a little bit more about that, Calder. Did Anson have like interns? What did he have? Like he had a clipboard out there and he's tracking you mentioned every shot, every goal, every 1v1.
So there's one, I don't know what his title is now, but general, like manager of everything, Tom Sander, who would have his clipboard and he was the guy. He kept track of all of it at the end of the day. But then there were a lot of, they were called, I think we called them managers, but they would set up the field, essentially like the ultimate kit people and stat takers. And then also there were a lot of people out at the field supporting and helping to take these stats. And now it's funny, in the professional environment, I realize how much of a luxury that was, because we don't have that, you know, at Gotham FC, you don't have 20 people out picking, you know, watching every single player and what they're doing. So there was always an aspect of recording, and people actually set up at the field to help with that recording. But there was a system, I mean, because Anson's been doing this for so long, there was a system where it wasn't as hard to, it's not the logistical nightmare that maybe you're thinking. It would be set up in a way where he would even call out like, Betsy, miss, Yael, miss, or whatever. So somebody's just looking down. And so they had their system in place. And really part of it too is that because there were no secrets and your successes and failures were just out there, like literally he would yell miss, or when we were doing fitness, he'd be like, he would just yell out people's names who didn't make the line in time so somebody could write it down. Nobody was sensitive. Like everyone knew some people are going to succeed, some are going to fail. And so it took away that fear of being called out by a coach, or that someone was going to notice your mistake, because everyone was going to notice your mistakes no matter what. And everyone was going to notice your successes. So it was almost, it desensitized us a lot to that. And I think there's great benefit in that, to be able to all acknowledge who has succeeded or failed honestly and openly within your team culture is really freeing, because many team cultures are actually built around hiding those moments, I think. And there was definitely no hiding those moments at UNC. It was all out in the open.
That's the immediate feedback. That's just the most amazing immediate feedback. And that's how growth happens. And there's no doubt that that was the reason, or a main reason, for 20 plus national championships.
Yeah.
Yael, one more question too I got for you is that I know that when you started playing, I think you started around 7 years of age or something, you were playing with boys mostly, right?
So at first I just played on a normal girls recreational team. And then I tried out for the more competitive girls team my age. And from there on, I don't know why I had this idea in my head that now is very obvious to people, but if I realized that I was pretty serious and that if I wanted to get better, I needed more of a challenge. And so I, instead of driving, you know, an hour and a half at that age to the more elite club, I played up an age group with the local girls. And then I eventually moved to a boys team as a way to challenge myself. I was fortunate that the initial coach and mentor I had, named Ashley Hammond, was the one who facilitated a lot of that. He was actually the coach of the boys team. So it became a safe space and a safe environment for me to be able to do that. And I had him always looking out for me. It was quite I think that environment, now that I think back, I was around middle school age. I played on a boys team, and that really scarred me for life socially in a lot of ways. There's still some damage. I don't know if I can repair, but half joking, but I think that there are a lot of aspects to that as a girl playing on a boys team, the social and emotional part, as well as the physical. And I grew up, and my entire life I played in environments where if I was an average on the day in my team environment, I felt it was a success. I'm not used to being one of the better players. And I still now, when I go play, my best, most enjoyable place to play, I play off-season kind of small-sided pickup games with men who are, some of them MLS and USL players. And for me, if I can hang and not disrupt their game, I feel hugely successful. And that's an amazing accomplishment for me. And I still enjoy that because of how I grew up playing. And like I said, you know, I think a lot of players who play professionally are used to being the best on their team and being the star player. And I never was anything like that on my teams.
Got it. Cool.
I see a question here from Santiago about feedback from coaches or teams using the app on how younger players work on the mental part of their game. So really what we've done with the mental training is it's a taste at what true mental training would be. We don't, for the Techne app, it's mostly technical training. we have now offered a little bit of the physical and mental side of things to give players a slight understanding of that there is this whole other realm where you should and can be attending to. It's really difficult with those, I think more so than the technique, to cater it towards the individual player. And that's what's lost on our platform, is that it's all kind of best practices based on a general understanding of the tools that you need as a player, but certainly physically, depending on where you are in your development, your unique strengths and weaknesses, and same thing with the mental training, depending on who you are and how you view the game and your personality and your age and so many things, you would need something more tailored to you if you really wanted to embark on this long journey. So what we've done is we give people a snapshot of what is it like to train mentally. And we have a sports psychologist who provides the guidance and the instruction. And so it'll be a really short, for example, something about breathing techniques and something about focus and confidence. And what it is, it's a little understanding of, you should be thinking about this and here's how to think about it. And if you need more and want more, you probably should go find something a little more substantial or something individualized. But we've had parents reach out and say, my son suffers from anxiety and this has really helped, or my daughter was hospitalized for an injury and she actually used the breathing technique for that environment. And so, I mean, I'm always honored when I hear that kind of feedback, but I think the reality is for most people, if you really want to embark on that part of the journey, ours is just, it's dipping your toe in the water.
Great.
Thanks, Frank. I see Frank from, I believe, Arlington Soccer. I see the logo said that the club uses the app, and if players start to see progress, it becomes self-fulfilling and we see them start to train more and more often. And that's true. We try to help our teams and clubs highlight the players training on their own in order to help facilitate that. I think the more positive reinforcement players can get, not just that we see you are doing the work, but wow, that you really did well at connecting your passes today. Have you been working on that? Or I see your left foot is getting better. What have you been doing at home? And to continue to reinforce those things and to allow your players who are working hard, whether they're the top or bottom players in your team, to be acknowledged and celebrated for the improvement they're making, I think reinforces a lot. I know in team environments I was on, I can remember quite often the players are so eager to impress their coach or to get that positive affirmation that if I had a coach that said, I like how Susie's wearing her socks. Every time I put on my socks to come to training, I probably would be thinking about should I do it like the coach wants? It's the same thing. If your coach is saying, wow, we do juggling for a warm up and I see that Bobby, look like you've been practicing your juggling. Great job. It's in the player's head. Like, oh, Bobby's been practicing juggling. So maybe next time, maybe I should consider doing that. Some will and some won't, but it's just, what you praise or what you give attention to, the players do pay attention to as well.
Yeah, I got to ask you kind of a professional question. So obviously, to get to, a professional level, you have to have a, certain qualities, right? But how do you kind of see the professional players as far as their level of consciousness, deliberate training, desire to improve? Do you see even various levels within the professionals, and how do you respond to players that perhaps can improve at a different rate based on how they train?
Well, absolutely. I think there are different levels when it comes to professional game. And the reality is that all professional players are there for a slightly different reason. Everybody's there because of what makes them the best at what they do, not because they're the most well-rounded player that ever existed. And I think that's something that's important for young players to realize too. It's important to be well-rounded and to work on your weaknesses, but what will allow you to succeed is what makes you special and different, like what makes you valuable to a team. And that's quite often what makes you really, really good. And the thing I think across the board, especially on the women's side, I can really only speak to the women's side, but I've seen a little bit on the men's side too, especially at the USL level or like second league level. The mindset to improve is really ingrained in the athletes. And oftentimes people aspiring to that level don't think about the fact that players, once they reach that level, it's not over. You sign a professional contract and then your journey begins. Then you want to earn your way onto the team. Then you want to be a starter. Then you want to be, the team captain, and you want to play consistently 90 minutes every game. And there's always that next level. So for all professionals, I think, depending on why they're there, you have some supremely talented athletes who it comes a little bit easier to them and don't have the same desire to have fine-tuned things over the years. And then you have somebody like me who didn't have that naturally. I didn't have the instinctual thing where I was just going to come and dominate. I was there because of the work I had done over the years. So I had a great appreciation for continuing to do that work and to fine-tune my game. So I think while there's it varies, it's really hard to get there if you haven't been intentional in some way about how you approach things, even if it's just preparing to perform at your best or whatever it is that you're, or recovery or whatever it is, to be at your best day in and day out over a whole season and multiple seasons takes an extraordinary amount of work that's not just there when you're in front of your coach. So I think that's the big thing, is that the work goes on far beyond the time when you're in front of your coach. It has to do with fueling your body well and hydrating and all those things you do at home that, it's the training, but it's like the full package is so much more than that even.
Yeah.
Seems like that's the greatest gift of all, is kind of what you've done, which is teaching that intentionality, that love and that talent to be intentional with your own training. And the earlier that you have that, the better, right? That's what Tom does, with parents and kids falling in love with the ball. But if an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old can catch it at those ages, right? And you see the number of years that they can really, that flying head start that they can have, it's just amazing. So it's like, do you have examples of younger kids that have kind of caught that bug that maybe didn't have it before, that you've been kind of directly involved with, kind of like what these coaches did to you and how they inspired you? I'm sure you've seen that a few times in over the years.
Yeah, some of the most moving feedback I get is seeing the young players who I view as like kind of like little versions of me in the sense of their mindset, because sometimes we joke, we have some players in our app who have like thousands of days training streak, meaning they train 10 minutes a day using the app and consecutively. And I think back and I'm like, one, I feel stressed by the fact that they've done this, because sometimes someone will email and say, my player, we lost internet access or whatever, and the player lost their streak and they're in a panic. And I'm thinking like, oh, this poor kid. But really what we kind of joke about is we have created this community of, I lovingly call them little psychos, but it's this mindset that I think I see some of these players post videos and stuff, and some have the potential to be great, and some probably, for whatever reason, are not going to be professional soccer players, but they work really hard at it every day and they have this connection to what they're doing and they love it. And to me, I think about what that does in their life and how valuable that is, because anything they want to do, they will now have the understanding of the proper habits, the discipline. It's the character part of it that I see now a huge appreciation for in any job I do, anything. I have this vision of how I want it to be, or who I want to be, or how I want to do it. And then you break it down. Okay, well, what needs to happen this year? What needs to happen literally every day? And then when you're in the trenches working at it every day, you can also look up at the vision and say, okay, well, this is a little painful or hard or unpleasant, but it goes to my vision. And if I string it together today and tomorrow, and what I do see is players who have that understanding and who both have it already and then connect with our training resource. And then that's how we connect with them. And I can stay in touch with their parents and they send me videos and all those things. But then also we get some really nice feedback on occasion from a parent saying, my kid was a really average player and didn't really want to go to practice very often. And then found the Techne app and has been out, asked me to clear stuff out of the garage so that he or she could train. And to me, I'm like, that is one of the coolest things I could hear, is that somebody who didn't really enjoy the sport because they probably didn't feel very good and didn't feel very confident. The ability to gain that confidence and to trust in yourself and feel yourself get better, I think is literally life-changing. and it could change their whole relationship with the sport. So that's the most rewarding, I think, to be able to experience that through someone else's recounting it.
I've got another question here for you as well, is that out here in Asia, one of the huge cultural differences we have here is that Asian families look at sports or playing football or soccer as a distraction to education. So they try to limit the amount of physical activity that they have. They have this mindset that if you play sports, you're never going to do well performing academically. You turn that upside down. I mean, and I think in America, that the whole idea of student athlete. But can you maybe just touch a little bit? I mean, you did so well. You excelled with honors in high school and in college. And what was that like? Did you feel that playing sports gave you that outlet and the whole idea, like Paul and I, we work with Dr. Rady from Harvard Medical School, who wrote the forward and the afterword for our book. And he talks about, he studied the effects that physical activity has on supercharging the brain. Is there any kind of insights you could give us, maybe your own experience?
Yeah, well, I think that for me, so I try to pick apart here what I think is normal human nature and what's me and my personality. And so I think, just to preface this, I think a lot of this is just me, but for me, I believe that discipline just is something that once you become disciplined in something, it goes across all facets of your life. Quite often, it's really hard. I don't often meet somebody who's really disciplined at sports and then just like doesn't care and throws everything else out the window, or who's a really excellent student, but then doesn't appreciate what it would take in another sphere to do that as well. So for me, I kind of laugh when I hear you read the academic honors part of my bio, because I didn't care about school. I wanted to be a footballer. If I could have gone pro and not gone to college, and that was an opportunity that made sense in my life, I would have done that. I actually, I don't have my college degree. I didn't graduate. I did well in all my classes, but I went pro the second I could, and I didn't take any of the extra I would have needed to sort out graduating. So I did well at it because that's who I am, and because I knew I needed to get my homework done, and I care about doing things the right way and making sure, if soccer was my priority, that I needed to not pull an all-nighter because I wanted to be rested for my game. So I would have mapped out my week so that I could do the training I want, have my focus and sleep well before my game, and also get all my assignments and projects done and everything like that. And I would think about and strategize on if this sounds bad, maybe I wouldn't suggest this directly to players, but I would strategize on what could I cut corners on and what did I need to do. And it was all very intentional. And so in college, I purposely would take a lighter class load during the season. I would take easier classes. I would ask the academic advisor, which are the ones that are going to be a little bit lighter, so I could still do well, but not be, spending hours and hours writing papers and whatever. And so everything I did, it wasn't that I maxed out in everything. Soccer was always my priority, but because of that, I organized the rest of my life to support it. And I think that's what maybe I can understand, where culturally it's like either you care about one or you care about the other. But in my life, I didn't find that I had to ever pick. But that was because probably some parents wouldn't have loved how I approached it.
Well, yeah, my follow-up is that, what was it like when you were younger than in your home? Usually when you find kids that excel academically or even in soccer, there's a culture at home that values education. There's a culture at home that, whether it's, your father, your mother, someone played soccer. And I'm just always wondering, with kids who do well, that it seems to be a strong link. Paul and I are involved in research with the University of Houston. We've been working for the last year and a half, and we're conducting research. And one of the biggest challenges that we find is that parents, most kids that don't do well academically, they don't seem to have parents that are participating in their education. And it's somewhat like that with soccer too, in the early stages as well. We find that the kids that do excel, and we're talking about, most of the great players around the world, they started very early, and the active role that the fathers and the mothers played was key. So I'm just assuming that maybe in your household, maybe your parents were quite strict about your study time when you were a younger child, or maybe that's how you develop that kind of discipline to study? Or
Well, my parents, I wouldn't say they were strict in any way, but my parents were extremely involved and very special people in the way in which they were involved, and the example they set, which was that they're both lifelong athletes. My dad was a competitive marathoner.
there you go.
But and so if you think of like marathon runners, they're long distance runners. So already you think like you have that weirdo mindset of like liking training. So I would wake up for school and my parents had both done their workouts every single day. And I thought that was normal. And when I say every day, I never once heard, there was never that they got canceled or they didn't do it because of the weather. They'd be jumping rope in the house or doing some kind of weird like Nordic tracks ski machine thing they had. And this was normal for me growing up. And so I think that our family approach to things was like, you don't do something unless you're going to do it reliably and do it well. And that's just how you participate in the world. You're responsible, you're reliable, and you do your best at things. And so for me, there was no, like, I wasn't being told, oh, you need to be a good student or you need to train at soccer. If I was going to play soccer or go to school, you do the best you can. It like seems kind of funny to me. And there are kids who it came easy to me. I was in general a pretty smart kid who was fair, like the teachers liked me okay, and I wasn't trying to misbehave. I had the natural instinct to not want to do, I wanted to do right and wanted to get that praise. But at the same time, it was certainly a family value that you should try to be successful, and that success was celebrated, and this is just how we do things. So I think, there's a lot that was ingrained in me, and it certainly was at home, to your point.
Great insight.
Sure is.
Even things like showing up on time, and I think of stuff like that. Like we would look at how long it was gonna take. We'd calculate in if there was gonna be traffic, and okay, we want to be there 10 minutes early so you're not running onto the field late, and things like that was just the way we did it. And I didn't think that was, oh, we're being extremely diligent, or that's crazy. Why do you guys like that? That was just how we did it. And I think about how that influenced how I think of everything is you have your end site. Okay, you want to be there a little bit early, and then you backtrack from there. Same thing. If you want to get an A, it's not about getting the A. It's like, if you want to get an A, you'll have to have turned in all of your assignments. You have to have done a good job and read the book in advance, so you have time to think through an outline and then write your paper. And it was just like this understanding of the process, I think. And backtracking from the results you want to understand, well, then you need to account for the process.
Yeah, it's great you say process, because here in Japan, the #1 spectator sport in this country is marathon. And because Japanese, if you think about it, their culture, they're the best at enduring. It's like they'll wait for 3 hours in line to buy cupcakes. I mean, and it's all about the process. It's the journey. Yeah. I know you have 2 Japanese players at your club. One is a good friend of mine, Kumi. How are they doing?
Oh, they're great. I love it. And they're always the most happy to be at training. I love it so much. Just no matter what's going on, the team won, the team lost, they embody this just like happy aura to be there. So yeah, I have a deep appreciation for what you're talking about. And I think with process comes the longevity part, is you don't give up the second it gets hard. You understand that to get the end result, it may take something it's not that it's not pleasant, because it doesn't need to be viewed as unpleasant if it's part of what you're expecting to do.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, Yael, this has been amazing. Really has been. I've enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much for your time. So, this is the first time I've really got to spend any time with you. I've heard about you for many years, and thank you so much for this time. I mean, unbelievable.
Thank you guys. I appreciate the conversation. It was enjoyable. As you guys can tell, I really enjoy thinking and talking about this stuff. So thank you for those of you who joined, and everyone who's going to hear the recording. And thank you, Paul and Tom, for inviting me and thinking of me as somebody you wanted to have on. I really am honored to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of all of the guests that we've had, and we don't say this every time, but this is going to be one of the more memorable presentations that you did. So thank you for everything you're doing. You're really a treasure to our sport and everything that's going
Thank
on.
you.
And best of luck for Gotham FC.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay. All right, Paul?
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Guys, have a great day.
Okay,
again, Mal.
take care. Bye-bye.